Macintosh.
Hello, welcome to Marchintosh 2022. Um, so I've got this OL or one laptop per child OLPC XO-1 laptop that I picked up for $1 at an auction. So see if you guys can see it. Anyway, so it's quite a neat little machine. The firmware was the original firmware, and that of course has a date problem where the battery runs out, it loses the date time. It's a bad date time it gets from the firmware when it tries to boot, and it can't boot. So there's no way to update it unless you attach a serial cable by soldering the wires on or finding the little tiny little adapter to the motherboard, set up a shell session so that you can get into it, and that part actually works, and you're able to set the time, get it to boot, then you update the firmware, problem goes away. So there's a lot of these that have been sitting around in a closet somewhere, people get them out and they don't work. Fortunately, I was able to figure it out, was able to get it done. So the little computer is working. It's kind of a neat little thing. I updated the firmware on it. Not gonna go into the details of that. The notes will be in the description for the video, so you'll be able to go to it if you have one of these and you can do it. So you update the firmware. You also update the OS to the most recent one available, which is a decade old. And you can set it up so that it'll dual boot, either into the sugar interface that all the kids used, or you can go into Gnome, and that's off of Fedora 18, so it's pretty out of date. Anyway, there's a way you could do that. You can also, instead of using the 1 GB of space that's built into the machine, you can boot off of an SD card. So that gives you a lot more space to use. And there's a link and instructions for how to do that. What I found, and this is why it's a Marchintosh thing, because the laptop obviously isn't, is that Neo Amsterdam had a wiki post where he had a custom build of Mini vMac that allowed it to run on the XO. So he made it available as an activity, which allows you to run it from the sugar interface. And he had a small disk in there with a few games on it and stuff. So I thought, what the heck, I'll get that running. He also has a blog post where he talks about how you can update the disk that's included in the package. So I went ahead and took one of my 1 GB 755 disk images with HyperCard on it and everything, and managed to get that in there. It did not work with the sugar interface. Well, these things boot into GNOME too, so I went to GNOME, figured out where it was stored and everything, copied it into the user directory for the OLPC user, replaced the disk image, and although it's a stripped down version of Mini vMac, you can only load one disk image on it. Some of the things actually work just like they normally do in a regular build. You can still drop files onto it from the graphical interface, things like that. I went ahead and got it set up so that you could do several things with it. One, replace the disk image with the files that you want for it. The second thing I did was I created a way to auto run it from boot, and also to put it in full screen mode. So you boot up the laptop and it takes 2 minutes to boot and do this. It goes right into Mini vMac so that you can use it as if it were a Macintosh laptop. I also figured out how to update things so that I could put it a desktop icon on, things like that. But you know, that's all Linux stuff, so it's not too difficult to figure out, although it is a very old GNOME interface. It takes a little digging to find things on the way they set it up on that box. So anyway, so let's get into it. I thought I'd walk through the steps for replacing the disk image. So the first thing you have to do from the GNOME interface, which is, I've got a VNC terminal session going because I have a VNC server on the OLPC laptop. It's pushing the limits of what it can do, but it does work. So anyway, open the terminal. So let's do that. And if you look, there's the folders. I apologize for the small size of the screen, but you've got activities, documents, etc. Activities is actually a hidden folder, and the permissions for it are reset every time you boot. But that is the folder where Mini vMac is stored and everything. So what I've done is you'll see this vMac subdirectory here. I set that up and a shell script and stuff so it'll run everything I need. So first thing you need to do is create that directory and then copy. So the command you would need, and you want to be root to do this, is copy activities mini v mac dot activity / mini vmac, and you would copy that into the vmac subdirectory. The other files that you need is the ROM file, and that is vmac.rom. You need to put that in there. There's one other file that I copied over, and it was so that I could do the desktop icon. And that is actually in another directory called activity, and that is mini vmac.svg. So if you copy all three of those files in there, you'll have the basics that you need for running it. I did not copy the built-in disk because it's tiny, and there really wasn't much that I wanted that was in there, so I didn't bother copying that. The other odd thing is that the disk file is actually gun-zipped, probably to save space, and when it's in the activity, it uses that to load the disk. I tried replacing it with my larger disk, and in the sugar interface, it's not booting that disk. So I'm not sure what's going on there, and I really don't want to figure it out because I really don't use the sugar interface on this thing anyway. Maybe that's something I can do later. Anyway, now that you got those files there, so if we look at the vmac directory, you'll see that I've got this os_755.dsk file. That's the 1 gigabyte disk that I added that's got System 755 on it. I've got HyperCard and some other things, the usual tools that you put on an emulated Mac. The next thing you need to do, well, let's try running it just to see if it works. So vMac, it helps if you type the right thing. Okay, and if we run it, mini vmac os_755.dsk, it will boot up in mini vmac in a tiny, tiny little screen, as vmac does. And of course, there's keyboard tools. You can do Control F to make it full screen. So that's full screen in this. And you can run a HyperCard, and it actually performs pretty well. I say that now that it's taken forever to load. Okay. Apparently on this image I'm missing some fonts, so I'm going to have to fix that. I apologize. The mouse goes all over the place with this viewer, so I'm not sure what's going on there either. Anyway, but it works. So just like with any other mini vMac thing, you want to close things properly. We can get the mouse to work here. Okay. And come on, mouse. You can do it. Really? You're going to go all over the place. Oh, jeez. I wonder that this VNC server must be a real pill. Okay. Shut down. And in Mini vMac, you do Control Q to quit. Of course, there's some lag here. Yeah, isn't that a great session? I'm going over Wi-Fi. And like I said, I'm really pushing the limits of what this little tiny ARM processor can do. This version of Gnome was a real pain, and of course it's a very stripped down build that's in here. So one of the things that you're going to have to do is go out and adjust the yum configuration so that you can do updates to the thing. So anyway, so the next thing, so it runs. Now we need to, so you would need to copy a disk image. You want it in NDIF read-write format, which is the standard disk format for, what is it, disk copy 6 or something like that. Anyway, yeah, if it works in Mini vMac, it'll work on here. All right. You need to then make sure you copy it. There's two USB ports? No, there's three USB ports on this thing. So it's really easy to use a thumb drive to copy things over. You can even use the drag and drop interface. I use the command line to do it, but that'll be in the instructions. So you get your image in there. What else? The next thing that I did is I created a script to actually run it. It's a lot easier when you're messing around with, if you're going to do an icon on the desktop. If you have a single line command to run, and because I wanted to do things like make it go to full screen mode, I've got this shell script that I created. So let's look at that. And up a directory. So if we cat vmac.sh, basically the first line of it is just telling it's the bash shell and what the environment is. It changes to the subdirectory for vmac, and that's because trying to put all those path names on there, I think there must be a path name limitation on this build because it's pretty short and it didn't work properly, so it's easier just to change the subdirectory where the program is located. And then I run Mini vMac and tell it which disk to load. The ampersand at the end and then the next two commands are something I'll cover in a little bit, and that's so that it changes it to full screen mode. But you could just do that simple, two-line script where you just change directory and then run the program, and that way you could, if you went to the terminal and you wanted to run it, you could just run one command, or you could, like I showed you, you could set up a desktop shortcut. After I uploaded and installed or rather did an update with Yum and installed a bunch of stuff, I also installed the main menu editor, which was not installed with it. And I started it up. It's going to take a little bit to get here. Da 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 da. All right, so if you look, I added, come on, a Macintosh shortcut to the menu. If you look at the properties, it's like the desktop shortcut. Come on. It runs that same shell script. The icon is that SVG file that we copied over that wasn't really necessary. So that's how you get the icon. It's kind of a nice to have. Okay, so let's get out of here. Close, close. Not the fastest computer in the world. All right. So we've got that shell script, and now if we do it that way, and again, this does the full screen thing. So if I run my shell script, you also have to set the permissions so that it's executable. There's a command line command to do that, and it's chmod, all one word, space plus, oh, well, here, let me just type it out. chmod plus X for executable, and then the file name. So in this case, it would be vmac.sh, and that will set it as an executable file so that you can run it. All right, so the next thing that we want to do is if you want it to auto start when you first log in, so the way these laptops work is it will log into Sugar first, and then because I picked Gnome as my default environment, it'll then launch Gnome. And when Gnome launches, there's a way to tell it to execute a file on startup. So let's see that. Well, before I go there, to make this so that you can send a Control F to it, let's look at that file again. It's not going to worry about it. So, and again, this is all in the instructions. So we let it, you execute mini vMac in the background. That's what the ampersand does for you. And then you sleep for a short period of time so that it has a chance to load the window. And then you use XDo tool to send a keystroke to it, and you send a Control plus F, Control F. And that will make it go into full screen mode. If you don't do the sleep here, it's not going to have time to let the window load and get focused so that you can send the key. If you don't run mini vMac in the background, the script will never have an opportunity to run the sleep and then the XDo tool command. So you have to have it run in the background so the script continues to work. So that's all that. Okay, now setting up the desktop. So there's a subdirectory that's hidden, and ls minus la .config. Okay, and .config contains what we need. So cd config, take a look. There's several things in here. There's an Autostart directory. So we go into there, and I created a vmac.desktop file. And if you look at that, it's got the environment is xdg-open. It's got a line called desktop entry. The type is application. Exec is my shell script. Hidden is false. You enable auto start with x-gnome-autostart-enable equal true. The name I gave it was vMac, and then I stuck a comment in here that it's auto starting mini vMac. So with that in there, okay, gonna record this while we can. So I rebooted the machine, and our VNC connection's trying to reconnect. It's gonna take a few minutes for this to happen, but so I'm gonna start the VNC server. It's started, so it should reconnect. Hopefully. Yeah, looks like it is. So it's connecting. and of course it's got to go through its graphical user interface startup sequence, and one of the things it's doing is loading Mini vMac, and that might take just a little bit. There we go. All right, so started a new VNC session in a new user interface, so it's ran through the startup routine, did the auto start of the app. There you go. Now I've got a laptop that will, it takes 2 minutes, but it'll boot into Macintosh System 7.5.5, and you can play around with it. Yay! That's about all the utility this thing has for me. So anyway, I want to wish everybody a happy Marcintosh. This is Eric's Edge. Subscribe and like, and talk to you later.